My husband stole my card and spent $50,000 on luxury vacations with his mistress, but he didn't know I work in cybersecurity. And that card tracked everything automatically. Now he's arrested, broke, and his mistress left him instantly. I'm 34 years old. I work in cybersecurity, and what happened 6 months ago still seems so surreal to me that sometimes I think I dreamed it. But no, it was completely real. And it basically ended my marriage in the most spectacular and dramatic way possible. I guess I should start from the beginning. Although honestly, I don't even know when it all really started. You know? I met Julian like 7 years ago, at one of those parties with friends of friends where I normally get bored after 20 minutes. But he was different. I mean, he was charming in that way that makes everything seem more interesting, brighter, like life was a constant adventure. We got married 2 years later, and at first everything was perfect, like permanent honeymoon vibes. But looking back, I should have seen it coming. All the signs were there. I was just too busy working and trusting him to notice them. Julian never had a stable job, and when I say never, I mean literally in the 5 years we were married. He always had some project in mind, some business idea that was going to make us millionaires, but nothing ever materialized. And meanwhile, I paid for everything. The rent, the food, going out. Basically, our entire life depended on my salary. At first, it didn't bother me that much. I made good money at my cybersecurity job, designing fraud detection systems for banks and corporations. Like, ironically, my specialty was catching people who did exactly what Julian ended up doing to me. But, well, I didn't know that yet. He told me he just needed time to find his path, that it was a matter of waiting for the right opportunity. And I, like an idiot, believed him because I loved him, and because I wanted to believe that things were going to get better eventually. The night everything exploded was in March, I think, or maybe early April. I don't remember the exact date, but I do remember it was Tuesday, because I had worked late preparing an important presentation for the next day. I got home, around 10 at night, completely exhausted, and Julian was on the couch watching Netflix as always. Like that was basically his daily routine while I killed myself working. I went straight to bed without even eating dinner, and I fell asleep almost instantly. But what I didn't know was that Julian stayed up, waiting for me to be deeply asleep to do what he did. Turns out that night, around 2 in the morning, he went into the study where I have my work laptop, opened it. He knew my password because I trusted him. Big mistake. And searched through my files until he found information for one of my credit cards. I didn't find out about anything until 3 days later, when I opened my banking app by chance while waiting for my coffee at Starbucks. I almost dropped my phone when I saw the balance. I mean, I had like $50,000 in charges that I definitely hadn't made. My heart started beating so fast I thought I was going to have a panic attack right there in the middle of the coffee shop, and I started reviewing each transaction, trying to understand what the hell was going on. There were hotel reservations in Paris, first-class flights, expensive restaurants, luxury stores, basically everything a person could want on a dream vacation. Except I hadn't left the country in months, and definitely hadn't authorized any of those expenses. The first thing I thought was that I'd been hacked. Because I work in cybersecurity, so obviously my mind went straight to that. But then I started reviewing the details, and something didn't add up. The charges had started exactly the Wednesday after that night. I came home late, and Julian had been acting weird all that week. Like more nervous than normal, checking his phone constantly and being super evasive when I asked him what he was doing. And then it hit me. That horrible feeling in your stomach when all the pieces fit together and you understand something you didn't want to understand, you know? Julian had stolen my information and gone on a trip without telling me anything, probably with some woman because there's no way he spent $50,000 alone, and I had been so busy with work that I hadn't even noticed he wasn't home at night. But here comes the part that still makes me laugh at the irony of it all, because it turns out that credit card Julian stole wasn't exactly a real card. It was part of a fraud detection training program my company had created. Like a dummy account we used to simulate fraudulent transactions and train artificial intelligence systems to identify suspicious patterns. The account was linked to a tracking system that recorded absolutely everything. Every transaction, every location, every device that accessed the information. Basically, it was like a perfect trap to catch fraudsters, and Julian had fallen right into it without having any idea. When I realized this, I literally sat in my car for 20 minutes processing the situation, because on one hand I was furious and devastated that my husband had betrayed me like that. But on the other hand, there was a part of me that was like, this is perfect. I have him completely trapped. The first thing I did was call Chloe, my lawyer, because I needed to understand my legal options before doing anything. Chloe is amazing, honestly, super direct and doesn't beat around the bush. And when I told her what had happened, her first reaction was basically, "You have to report this immediately because we're talking about federal fraud. It's not just a marital problem." She explained that stealing credit card information and using it without authorization is a serious crime, and the fact that it was my husband didn't change anything legally. In fact, it could make it worse because he had abused the trust of our marriage to commit the fraud. She told me I needed to document everything, save all transaction records, and contact the authorities as soon as possible. And although part of me still didn't want to believe this was really happening, I knew she was right. The next day, I got a call from this Agent Keller, a federal investigator who worked in financial fraud. Turns out my company's detection system had automatically flagged the suspicious activity and notified the corresponding authorities because when we designed that program, we specifically configured it to do that in case of real activity. Agent Keller was super professional, but also surprisingly understanding. When I explained that the suspect was my husband, he told me that unfortunately, he saw cases like this more often than people would think, and that he needed my complete cooperation to proceed with the investigation. I gave him access to all the records, showed him the system logs that proved Julian had accessed my laptop that night, and basically we built a solid case in a matter of days. Julian came back from his trip like a week later, and the way he walked into the apartment still gives me chills, because he arrived super relaxed and tan, with a huge smile like he'd had the best vacation of his life, completely oblivious to the fact that his life was about to fall apart. He greeted me like nothing, gave me a kiss on the cheek, and started telling me about Paris as if I didn't already know everything he had done. He said something like, "You should have seen the Eiffel Tower at night. It's incredible. And I ate at this Michelin-starred restaurant that was insane. Like each dish was a work of art." And I just looked at him thinking, is this really happening? Does he really think I'm not going to find out? I decided to play his game for a while, because Chloe had advised me to try to get a recorded confession if possible. So I asked him things like, "Wow, that sounds amazing. And how did you pay for all that?" And he, with the calmest face in the world, told me he had used one of my cards because he knew I wasn't using it much lately. He didn't show a single bit of remorse or guilt. In fact, he seemed almost proud of what he had done, as if he was super smart for having found a way to finance his dream trip without having to ask my permission. I kept asking him questions, letting him sink deeper and deeper with each answer, and the whole time I had my phone in my pocket recording every word. When I asked him if he had gone alone, he got a little uncomfortable, but eventually admitted he had met someone, a woman named Nicole, who apparently he had been seeing for months without me knowing anything. He said it wasn't anything serious, just someone he spent time with, but that he had invited her on the trip because, and this is verbatim, he didn't want to be alone in such a romantic city. In that moment, something broke inside me. I don't know if it was rage or sadness or a mix of everything, but I kept my composure because I knew I had to finish getting all the evidence I needed. I asked him how much he had spent exactly, and he gave me an approximate number of $50,000, laughing like it was a joke, as if it wasn't an obscene amount of money that he hadn't earned and had no right to use. That was basically his complete confession, recorded in perfect audio quality, and at that moment I knew I had finished with everything I needed. I told him I needed air and left the apartment, and while I was walking down the street I called Agent Keller and told him, "I have everything." He just admitted everything, and you can come now if you want. Keller told me they already had a warrant and would arrive in approximately an hour, so I went back to the apartment and tried to act normal while I waited. Although inside I was shaking with nerves and adrenaline. When they knocked on the door, Julian went to open it thinking it was delivery or something, and the expression on his face when he saw 2 police officers and Agent Keller was something I'll never forget. He went from confusion to panic in literally 2 seconds, and started backing up as if he could escape somehow, but obviously there was nowhere to go. Agent Keller was very clear and direct. He told him, "Julian Martinez, you're under arrest for credit card fraud and identity theft," and read him his rights while one of the officers handcuffed him. Julian looked at me like this was my fault, like I was the villain in this situation, and started yelling things like, "I can't believe you're doing this to me. We're married. We're supposed to protect each other." And I just told him, "You stole my identity and went on vacation with your mistress using my money. What did you expect me to do?" They took him to the station to interrogate him, and according to what Agent Keller told me later, Julian initially tried to blame me. saying that I had given him permission to use the card and that this was all a misunderstanding. But when they showed him the evidence, the system logs that proved he had accessed my laptop without authorization, the recording where he confessed to stealing the information, and the testimonies from the hotels and restaurants in Paris confirming he had traveled with another woman, basically his defense completely fell apart. His lawyer advised him to accept a plea deal because the case against him was too solid, and eventually that's what he did. The agreement required him to pay full restitution of the $50,000, although honestly, I don't know how he's going to do that considering he's never had a stable job. Plus 200 hours of community service and probation for 3 years. He didn't go to prison, which in a way disappoints me because I feel like there should be more serious consequences for what he did. But at the same time, I just wanted this to be over, so I could move on with my life. Chloe handled the divorce super quickly. Basically, we argued there was financial fraud and betrayal of the marriage contract, and the judge was totally on our side. The papers were finalized like 3 months after the arrest, and it was probably the simplest and cleanest divorce Chloe had handled in years, considering those things can normally drag on for months or even years. The funny thing, and when I say funny, I don't mean it's actually funny, but rather ironic, is that Nicole left him basically the day after his arrest. Turns out she thought Julian had money, that he was some kind of successful entrepreneur or something, and when she found out he was basically an unemployed guy who had stolen from his wife to impress her, she completely disappeared. She didn't even answer his calls when he tried to contact her from jail. Like literally ghosted him. In the most absolute way possible. Part of me felt a kind of dark satisfaction when I found out about that, because at least he was left with nothing in the end. No money, no Nicole, no me, no complete freedom. Basically, he paid for everything he did. The first months after the divorce were weird, I'm not going to lie. There were moments when I felt incredibly liberated, and others when I wondered if I had been too harsh, if I should have. Tried to resolve things some different way, but every time I started to doubt, I remembered how I felt when I discovered the betrayal, that feeling of complete devastation and deception, and I knew I had made the right decision. My friend Lauren, who had been super critical of Julian from the beginning, should have listened to her. Honestly, helped me a lot during that time. Like she was there every time I needed to talk or cry or just drink wine and watch bad movies to distract myself. Now, 6 months later, I can honestly say, I'm okay. Better than okay, actually. I got a promotion at work. Ironically, because Julian's case became a perfect example of how our fraud detection systems work in real situations, and I ended up giving presentations about it at industry conferences, although obviously without mentioning the personal details. I moved to a new apartment, smaller but completely mine, where there are no memories of Julian or everything that happened, and I'm starting to feel like my life is really mine again, you know? Last week, I ran into Julian at the supermarket by chance. First time I'd seen him since the day of his arrest, and it was super awkward but also kind of revealing. He looked terrible. He had lost weight and had that look of someone who finally understands they screwed up everything completely. He tried to talk to me, started with something like, "Natalie, we need to talk." But I just told him, "We have nothing to talk about, Julian. It's all over." And kept walking. I felt his eyes following me as I walked away, but I didn't turn around. And when I left the supermarket, I realized I didn't feel sadness or anger, just a kind of calm indifference. And that made me know I've really moved on. I don't know what the future holds for Julian. Honestly, I don't really care much. I know he still owes most of the restitution, and that he's working at some kind of retail job to meet the payments, but that's his problem now, not mine. Sometimes I wonder if he learned anything from all this, if he really understands the damage he caused. But then I realize it doesn't matter, because what he did taught me something much more important, that I can't trust someone just because I love them, that I need to protect myself and value myself first, and that it's okay to ask for justice when someone betrays you, even if that person is your husband.